Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. I am delighted to be here at the Deanship of e-learning of Al-Imam Abdurrahman bin Faisal University, a leading university not only in Saudi Arabia, in the region and international. I hope my presentation today about the future of health professional education from informative to transformative will reflect some of my views and some of the major trends which are taking place in medical education and health professional education specifically, but all what I'm going to talk about are transferable to higher education in general. I am Hussam Hamdi, the Chancellor of Gulf Medical University in United Arab Emirates. By profession, I'm a pediatric surgeon and a medical educator and administrator. So I have different hats which I wear them depending on the situation, of course. I would like to share with you a reflection on the major reforms and disruptive forces which are changing healthcare and health professional education at present and will be more and more in the coming few years. It is important also that to put this in the context of the organizational culture change and the new ecosystem of higher education in general. I would like to share some of the implication of these changes on the technology-enhanced new worlds of medical education, and are we ready for these major changes. Let me start by saying that we don't have to forget that medicine is a social science. It is about people, societies, the human interaction, all this embedded in a rapidly changing healthcare system. The disruptive forces of change in healthcare are immense. We have huge advances which are happening in the medical knowledge and sciences. When you talk about molecular medicine, precision medicine, immunology, big changes which are taking place. The new technology which is influencing our life, and the fast changing demographics of the societies, the elderlies and the chronic diseases, all these are changing now which will affect the healthcare. The patients are better educated, they can find information at any moment, and usually we have as clinicians very interesting discussion. They are well informed, and we are in the era of informatics and big data analytics, which are influencing decision making and our views about how we treat patients and we look after the health of the society. It is important to understand that what we see is in healthcare, particularly in hospitals or the direct patient care, is just the tip of an iceberg. And this picture or drawing is from the Health System Science book, which has been produced by the American Medical Association. And it shows how different systems are involved at present and in the future of healthcare. So it is not, these systems are not in isolation, and they are interrelated and connected to each other. But in many places they are not considered, and that's part of the future of what's going to happen about how the healthcare systems talking to each other. We are moving from a model of the patient doctor relationship, the traditional view of, and we are preparing the students to play this role, to another role of the authentic care delivery models, which will integrate the medical education into the health care systems. So we have to be aware of all these systems which are contributing to the care of an individual patient or the health of a society and the interrelation between them. So you'll find that the educational systems, the social systems, different health care providers, a nurse, care coordinator, physical therapist, and so on and so forth. Many health professions contribute to the care of a single patient. So the health system science, which is coming up now as a very important paradigm in medical education and in healthcare delivery, is that the care, it takes place not only within the healthcare facilities, but it goes beyond that, beyond the walls of the hospitals, of the clinic. The healthcare systems, the new healthcare, depends on team-based models of care and as a consequential impact on the education of the health professionals. The multiple social and ecological determinant of health, the population healthcare based, is becoming very important, and it has to be reflected on the educational programs of all healthcare professionals. The issue of economics, values, now there is a common direction of what is called value-based healthcare. And in value-based healthcare, you look at the value is equal to the quality of the healthcare divided by the cost. So element of finance and costing and economics is becoming very important and will have an impact on the healthcare, and at the same time it has to be incorporated in the educational programs, and the students, regardless of their specialty, should be aware of all these new dimensions in health professional education. We are in the era of the big data, and the technology is now going to move with the patient and inside the patient, and all the data which are coming up either from an individual person or patient, which leads to the population health and vice versa. You'll find huge amount of data. How we use this data, how we interpret this data, how it influences the decision-making process is going to be a very important factor and dimension in health professional education. So we are talking all the time about artificial intelligence, and now artificial intelligence is embedded in everything, and that's why I believe that health profession students should be introduced to the informatics, introduced to what is artificial intelligence, and then how they can work with colleagues from other disciplines in advancing knowledge and application of knowledge in the healthcare of their society and patients. We all agreed, I think, on that medical education and health professional education is inseparable from the healthcare system of the country, its economics, political, social, and cultural systems. So this is very important. So it's we have to be careful when we try to move or to bring an educational system from a different context than the context of our national context or the local context. This is very important. And we have to understand that medical education and the future of medical education is not only about technology, and it is not only about the different types of curricula and different strategies of teaching and learning and all this sort. But it is much more complex. It is really the complex relation between medical education and the healthcare system, and this is what is known in the business world. They call it sometimes the wicked problem, which is a problem which doesn't have a clear solution, and it's while you're attempting to solve the problem, solutions comes up, but it is continuous. I call it sometimes the spaghetti problem, because you can imagine spaghetti, you don't know where is the beginning and where is the end. So we are preparing today's medical students concerning their competencies. We are bringing now the issue of interestability, the curriculum, the instruction, the assessment, and all the learning environment. So we train our students today in order to be fit to deliver 21st century patient care in this multi-system based practice. So that's a challenge which is taking place at present, is this integration with the systems. Let me have a pause now, and because all these changes and all what I've talked about now cannot succeed without looking into the organizational culture and the change which has to take place in the organization. And when I say organization, I mean two types of organization: the healthcare organization and the educational organization. They not only they have to be closely linked to each other, but they have to adapt and contribute to this rapid, unpredictable change. So the organizational culture change will be a major factor which will make the changes and make the innovation and make moving forward is going to be successful, or it will be difficult to implement, because if the organization culture is rigid and not flexible enough to absorb and adapt to all these changes. Definitely, organizational culture change is one of the major responsibility of leaderships. And the leadership role in building this new culture is very important. If the leadership is not taking this as a prime responsibilities, it will be really difficult to introduce changes. They should be very supportive to innovation, to changes, and try to introduce and motivate the different players, the different stakeholders to try to introduce innovation, to try to create innovation, even if these are very small pieces of innovations. The micro innovations need to be supported and nurtured and build on it. We should change the culture of the organization, which will support creative thinking, versus a culture which could be zero tolerance to mistakes, because without attempting to create new ideas or to innovate, nothing is going to happen, and definitely the probability of success and failure is always there. So this has to be encouraged and to be part of the culture. So the leader needs to create the culture, nurture this culture, and support the culture within the organization. Now I would like to touch on something very relevant to what I've been talking about it. I've been using the name systems, and system sciences, and I think we are now moving more and more towards developing what is called the academic healthcare systems and the academic healthcare centers. Uh, you will find this not uncommon or in many places, particularly in US or big government universities, which they have their own healthcare delivery system. But even in these institutions, there is usually some sort of a separation between academia, research on one hand, and the delivery system on another hand. The priorities and the responsibilities of the two may sometimes are presented as two separate they have two separate objectives, they have two separate missions, but in fact they have to be very close and get as close as possible to integrate and become one system of academic healthcare system. This is going to be, I expect, will be the norm, not the exception, and it will not only apply to government or public institutions, but you will find that even the private institution, private hospitals and private educational institutions will be part of these academic healthcare systems. So this is what I'm talking about, that usually you have the academia and healthcare are independent. Then it goes into a phase of limited integration to a moderate integration to a fully integrated or semi-fully integrated, which just conceptually it indicates how the two are working very close together. And this is not an easy input or changes. It takes time because, again, you have two organization cultures and you are trying to change the culture. So, as I've said, the public-private partnership will spread, will increase and become more regulated and encouraged. Even in countries where they have a healthcare delivery system based on public and private, the private will be involved and will pursue their development to also to encourage their educational and training role. And in an economy-driven world, the separation between even medical institution, which used to call them not-for-profit, and others for-profit, I think it will disappear. It has to be regulated because even what they are called not-for-profit, they have to be sustainable, and this sustainability has an economic consequences, and who will be funding and who are the payers and so on. So all these are new challenges which are facing not only the private but the public institutions and public universities. I expect there will be major changes in the organizational structure of universities and colleges. The current structure, which has been going for hundreds of years, is based on colleges, is based on a solid departmental structure. While we are in an era we are talking about competencies and integration and what we want to see at the end as a good health professional, whatever good means entrustable. I can trust him to treat me, to treat my patient, to treat my children, and so also the issue of entrustability. So I think we are moving now more and more to develop themes, units, and maybe department restructuring around the main themes which lead to the outcome competencies of the graduates. So perhaps there will be a department or units of patient population care, one on knowledge for practice. It will vary, the knowledge for practice, from a dental program to a medical program to nursing program and so on and so forth. They will have their uniqueness, but they all have a core of knowledge related to this discipline. We find in all programs now the issues of ethics and professionalism is becoming an integral part of any educational program in the health profession in particular. Research and innovation will be one of the important pillars which are integrated in the whole program from day one till the end of the program. I have been referring in my presentation on healthcare systems, economics, global health. All this will be part of the educational programs. So where they belong, in which department, in which unit, all this has to be looked at because at the moment we are still universities and college are based on departments which are based on in many places on subjects. So far I have reflected on the changes in the healthcare system, the healthcare delivery system, and some of the major changes in the educational system and the integration between the two in the academic healthcare systems. Now, if we focus on the programs and curricula and the new curriculum and how we are going to structure the curricula, which now we are using in many places, not only in medicine, but in engineering, in business, and others. Everybody is talking about competency-based education. So we have to understand that when we talk about competency, and I mentioned that one size does not fit all. I keep repeating that everything is context dependent. And we cannot imagine that there is one best type of curriculum which can be applied to all health professional education programs globally. They could share some of their features, but the context, what they're going to implement, is very important. But let me reflect a little bit on what are the common types of curricula which has been influencing health professional education. The one which is commonly used and has been going on now for about 100 years is that you have what you can call it a two pillars model. You have the basic science and then you have the clinical science. And this applies to not only to health professional education, but it applies to other type of higher education. You give the basic first and then the application later on. And there is no integration between the different subjects which are given and between the different phases. This has started from the time of Flexner and it's continuing till today in many places. In the 70s, we started to do some sort of integration between the basic medical sciences and the clinical sciences and introducing the concept of horizontal integration, vertical integration, the spiral approach, revisiting. It's a good model. It has been working. It has influenced many medical schools and many other type of health professional education. But over the time, we have started to discover that sometimes it is just window dressing. And what is happening is still the same that there is a separation between basic medical sciences and clinical sciences. And the wall between the two, although the clinical sciences starts early, but still is thick and rigid sometimes. Problem-based learning was one of the educational strategies which was introduced, and it is one of the strategies which can help integration within the curriculum, and still it is going on as one of the good strategies which can lead to important changes within the curriculum. And this started from the 80s, and you can imagine that it cannot be for 30 years the same thing, and it is gradually changing. We are trying to break more and more the rift or the wall between the basic sciences and the clinical sciences by embedding the learner very early in the work environment. For example, I give you a concrete example. The traditional physiology lab, pathology lab, histology labs, and all the practical aspects related to basic science, it is useless to teach it in a lab in the college. I think the best learning can take place of this in where the science is used and applied. So you'll find that a clinical neuroscience department will be the best place where you can teach the practical neuroscience. Integrating with anatomy, for example, all the ultrasound, the MRIs, the imaging is becoming a very important part of what we are doing. Ultrasound is becoming integral now to the teaching of anatomy. The same applies to biochemistry and so on. But it needs a lot of effort from the part of the faculty and those who organize the movement and mobility of the students between their academic environment and the practice environment. Now we are coming up perhaps in increasing the number of pillars which I think there have been a description of a 3 pillars programs. I'm talking about a 4 or a 5 pillars program. Still, of course, we have the basic medical science and you have the clinical sciences. But now social and system sciences are becoming very important. And research and innovation is another pillar which should influence all the educational environment, and research has to start early and to be not to be sort of a capstone or sometimes several years down the road before they are embedded in a research environment. We can imagine that all this is within a technology-enhanced and technology-rich environment. So technology of sciences like artificial intelligence, for example, has to be integral and integrated within all this. So the students, they have to be ready to use the technology which will be very important in healthcare practice and delivery. And they have to learn how to use the hospital information system, how to prescribe online, and all what they will be doing immediately after they graduate. Of course, we are now more concerned about competencies. It is not how much the students or the graduates know, but what he or she are able to do. We are going even more than that of identifying entrustable professional activities, and this same concept applies to all health professionals so long it has a component of practice and direct application and implications to a patient or to the health of a society. So maybe this is a model which now we are trying to change some of the curricula to adapt and to have one or more of these pillars, and they have to be there, not depending on the classical traditional two pillars model. With all that, the faculty will change, the faculty role will change, and this has been the subject of a lot of research, a lot of innovation which has been taking place over the last maybe 20-25 years, and moving from an information giver to a facilitator of learning, a role model, an expert, and an innovator. But all this cannot succeed except if we identify the faculty and categorize them according to their major role in introducing this innovation and so on. So I expect they're going the issue of faculty track systems, which is common in the West in a way, will be the norms. So there will be faculty who are more involved in education, faculty who are more involved in research, clinical faculty, and so on. So in the Middle East, still this is not very mature, but it has started in some universities and is moving forward. I always talk about one of the factor which hinder the changing the faculty role is what is called the faculty workload. It has to be redefined according to the new system of measurement, which should be more dependable on their roles, what they are actually doing. So it's a role-based model, and transforming what is used to be called teaching load into educational load, which is much wider than just teaching. The students are definitely going to be different. They are tech natives. The students and faculty will be working together more in team and as health professionals. Students from year one, day one, will learn at the workplace, and this is a big challenge, how we move them and expose them to the workplace very early. Interprofessional education will take place naturally, emphasizing teamwork, so long you bring them as close as possible to the future work environment. And as previously mentioned, research and innovation will be integral to the student learning experience and not limited to a research course or something like that. They have to be doing research and become part of their makeup. The new knowledge, there is a huge amount of knowledge which is coming up, including knowledge in technology, about technology, like machine learning and artificial intelligence, because they will be using it. Precision medicine, genetics, molecular medicine, leadership, management, and entrepreneurship will be part of the new knowledge, which has to be in health professional education. Social sciences, social determinant of health, all these are very important, including exposure to the healthcare system sciences. Of course, we have to be careful how to balance between getting or developing a mega curriculum, because we want to cover everything which they used to get before, plus all what is coming. So this balance, a critical balance between the two, has to be worked up and but governed by what are the competences at the end of a program. The technology-enhanced healthcare and education they're going to be a major paradigm shift. And we have to understand that health professionals' function will, with the technology, it will be enhanced, not replaced by technology. We are hearing every day about issues related to artificial intelligence, robotics, data analytics, and so on. So all these are enablers to better practice. The access to knowledge is now at the moment almost free. There will be consortia of collaborating medical colleges. We can share with each other's our resources. The communication will be better and better. Handheld devices, everything will be on their mobile phone. I expect what used to be called computer labs will disappear because they will be carrying the device, and ubiquitous learning will be very important. The influence of that on some of the traditional physical facilities like the libraries, it will be more like live and learn, like a Starbucks setting. Students are learning and living inside the university and learning outside the wall of the university. The big data and analytics of education will be very important in order to ensure the quality of the education. We can imagine with this technology, which is invading every aspect of higher education, we will have an ecosystem of e-learning, a smart ecosystem which involve everything, and maybe, I don't know, 40, 50 e-learning systems and operational systems, IT, will be within a university, and how they talk to each other, how they integrate with each other, that will be a very important challenge in development and in maintenance and support of the ecosystem. As I've said, the traditional classrooms will disappear. Virtual microscopy will replace the traditional microscopy labs. Artificial intelligence will influence pathology and radiology with pattern recognition. Of course, simulation, high fidelity, and artificial intelligence in education will be much more sophisticated. Perhaps here I show you an example of using artificial intelligence,
in which the learner plays the role of a physician who confronts a simulated patient. The patient in the scenario is played by a professional actor who is trained to simulate variable moods, attitudes, and emotional responses through verbal and nonverbal communication. The interview can be paused at any point to give time for discussion, generation of learning issues, and interaction with a PBL tutor.
Yeah, he's a great doctor. He's just excluding things. Yeah, no, I'm sure I'm fine.
So this is just an example of how artificial intelligence can and will influence education, and I'm sure the sophistication will increase gradually. We'll have new assessment system because assessment is very important, and there have been several attempts at the moment. One of them is developing by the National Board of Medical Examiner, the Ideal Question Bank, and there are other banks but mainly they are looking and trying to assess the knowledge component. Definitely there are other competencies which need to be assessed through programmatic assessment and a program of assessment in order to measure as much as we can the competency of the students and the competency of the graduate, because the community want to be reassured that they have a safe professional when he is responsible for lives of patients. One of the important issues related to assessment and approaches is to have a workplace-based assessment which should capture longitudinal students and patient experiences. And the evidence of that, and that's why you will find that e-assessment will be common, because we will be able to capture the interaction between the students and the patient while they are in actual contact in the hospital or in the at the work place. It could be even in the community, but they can record their interaction, and this could be captured in an e-portfolio. So the e-portfolio will be very important, and usually we are using in our setting the CanMed as roles of the graduate to be one of the structures used to develop the e-portfolio. We have another approach of capturing on the fly in the clinical environment and immediately report feedback and about the students and give the students an immediate feedback. So having said all this, nothing is going to improve except if the accreditation bodies review their approaches and support innovation and not to stiffen it. And we can't imagine that systems like the credit hour system, which was developed around the end of the 19th century, is still governing and influencing what we are doing now and how we are measuring education. We need to redefine what we mean by quality in higher education and how it fits the purpose of the education and higher education in general. The last point is about the physical facilities, because we cannot imagine all these changes will take place without that the future health profession education, the future universities in general, buildings and physical facilities will be the same. Learning, as I've said, will be mainly outside the wall of the traditional classroom. You all remember this type of computers and the floppy disk and all this. All this are changing, but the building and the technology, the furniture, and out of the class environment, all this will be completely different in the coming few years. So we'll see new infrastructure, new physical facilities to adapt to all these changes. Well, I took this picture actually a few days back. I was driving, and the driver, I was not driving, I was sitting in the back seat, and the driver was looking at the mirror all the time. So I told him, be careful, you have to read the road ahead, otherwise you will have an accident. I think this is a good example that if you keep looking at the mirror, what has been happening before or is happening now, and we try to do the same all the time, we will not be able to read the road ahead. So we need to read the road ahead and take all the necessary actions to change. So can we predict what's going to happen in the future? I think it's very difficult, but the only thing which perhaps we can predict with confidence is that for the coming few decades, the patient is still a human, the doctor is still human, and the medical student is still human. What will change is how they communicate, how they interact with and understand each other. It is all, I think, about connectedness in an integrated academic health system in a technology-enhanced environment. And last point, machine will not replace human, but it will enable them to be better in whatever they are doing. Thank you very much.